All right, it's my pleasure to now introduce the speakers for our first keynote session on digital health interventions. Matthew Buman is a professor in the College of Health Solutions and the director of the Precision Health Initiative. Dr. Buman's expertise is in the development and testing of mobile health interventions, including the incorporation of wearable technologies. And Fang, professor in the Edson College of Nursing and Health Innovation and director of the ASU Royal Center for Older Adults Living Alone with Cognitive Decline that we just heard a little bit more about. Dr. Yu is an expert in the testing of digital interventions for Alzheimer's prevention and treatment. So.
Morning, everyone. Just really amazing to see you all here and see this group of people gathered together. It truly is kind of a dream come true to get all of ASU together to talk about digital health for the day. So it's going to be an exciting day. Thank you all for arriving here and being here, and you make it a great day. So I'm going to start off. Fang and I are going to kind of switch back and forth, each take a little bit of time and then come back. And we're going to have to readjust this because I had to bring it up and then you'll have to bring it back down. So we're going to talk about digital health in the behavioral and lifestyle medicine space and share a little bit of some frameworks and models that are helpful in that area, and also try to capture a little bit of what is exciting in this space and what we can do in this space that we haven't yet done before, that digital health allows us to do. So the number one message I'll say is lifestyle interventions work. Lifestyle interventions are effective for preventing chronic disease and extending life. There's a broad evidence base to suggest that changing behaviors, improving physical activity, improving diet, improving sleep, reducing rates of smoking and tobacco use, these things, we have known methods that work to change these behaviors, and these methods are effective and they reduce the incidence of chronic disease. So much so that diet and physical activity alone can reduce the incidence of diabetes by nearly 60%, which is quite impressive. On the other hand, effective interventions for lifestyle are resource intensive. They're difficult to deliver at scale. They require multiple visits to multiple providers, dietitians, psychologists, exercise physiologists. They're really difficult to implement at a large scale, which is the scale we're talking about here, because I think probably all of us in this room need lifestyle interventions of one sort or another. And so these are difficult to implement. And digital health technologies really can be part of the solution, okay? Now, 10 years ago, these numbers were not nearly what they are today. Personal technologies, and when I say personal technologies, I mean things like smartphones and wearables, things that are now ubiquitous in our society. 91% of Americans own a smartphone, not a cell phone, but a smartphone. 96% use the internet. 59% own a wearable device. So these numbers are quite staggering. And it's even important, as Dean Udell mentioned, to think about other population subgroups, right? So technology use is high among all population subgroups. Data are showing from Pew Internet that African Americans and Hispanic Americans have higher rates of smartphone and smartwatch adoption than white Americans. Older adults, low income and low educational adults are adopting technology at the fastest rates. So it used to be we would say, well, technologies aren't really for older adults, right? But we know now, as Fang is going to talk about, that indeed these sorts of digital technologies are good for everyone if we design them with those folks in mind, if we design them engaging those individuals. In fact, older adults are demanding technology to support their health. And so we are here today. One of the reasons we're here today is to help answer that need and address those particular issues. So digital health technologies offer the potential to facilitate this provision of very complex, intense lifestyle interventions. And I'm going to pass it to Fang here to talk about some models that are useful to help us achieve that goal.
Thank you. I echo everything has been said so far. It's so exciting to see so many of you in the audience. So to develop effective digital health interventions, conceptual framework is important. So today I'm just going to scratch the surface by introducing the NIH stage model, focusing particularly using my own research as an example, how it has helped me to evolve my research and leading up to the scientific framework for the Wright Ball Center. So the NIH stage model is a framework to develop maximally potent and maximally implementable behavioral interventions, particularly multi-component interventions. It can be any population for any conditions and for any type of behavioral interventions. This came about in the 1970s and 80s when the AIDS and also cocaine pandemic was damaging the country and there was no effective treatment. So behavioral intervention really came around as one of the potential solutions. But there was no framework. So the first framework came about is the National Institute of Drug Abuse stage model, which mirrors exactly how the drugs are developed in phase 1, 2, 3 trials. So in stage 1, you do the dose determination of adverse events, and stage 2 is efficacy, and stage 3 is effective. And that has spawned extensive behavioral intervention development. However, there was a major gap that emerged after 10, 20 years of research. One is the interventions, although efficacious in research, are not reaching people who really needed them. So this is called the implementation cliff. And some of the other definitions for it is the intervention tested in research have very low fidelity when they are carried out in the community, in the real world, which as a result, it reduces the efficacy, effectiveness of the interventions. So how do we address this? And this is where the model came about, is the NIH stage model, which expanded the 3 stages into 6 stages, actually, emphasizing stage 0 to 5. Even though the model itself is numbered sequentially, the stages are not sequential. It means it's flexible. You might jump stages. You may start at a later stage, return to an early stage, or you go from an early stage proceeding to other stages. And it's not prescriptive. It's super flexible and versatile to allow trials to evolve. And then I walk you through how this model really helped me to develop exercise research. So one of the emphasis of the stage model is the intervention should be principle-driven. And I got a lot of questions. What is principle-driven? So it means one or two things. One is mechanism-driven. So we know exactly how it works, at least through basic science. And now we are trying to develop testing it out in humans. The second principle is it's based on a very well-established theory. So that, from that sense, it's also principle-driven. And it has to be user-inspired. And previously, Matt and have even Dr. Yudao had briefly mentioned, it has to be tailored to the people who are going to use them. Otherwise, it's meaningless. So I don't travel in the world of stage 1. Those are basic science research, but I'm a net consumer of stage 1. I read the literature on stage 1 all the time to get inspirations for intervention design and development. So when I first got started, what inspired me is the biological mechanisms, where basic science showed aerobic exercise actually modifies brain-derived neurotrophic factors, gene productions, and also even Alzheimer's pathology to improve cognition in mice and other animal models. So my principle-driven intervention is intervention that works on the biological level, probably will have beneficial effects on cognition in humans as well. So that's the stage 1 evidence I was using. And then let's move to the next stage, which is stage 1. I actually followed stage 0 and then 1. Because there was no intervention at the time I started to develop exercise interventions. So I had to start from scratch using evidence from older adults in general who are healthy, don't have cognitive impairment, and try to design this intervention and test it. So stage 1A is You're either modifying, designing, or adapting an intervention, or refining an intervention. And then stage 1B, you're doing feasibility and pilot testing of the intervention. And for me, the intervention was recombinant stationary cycles. This was a younger me doing the intervention with the participants. And figure out exactly how it works. Can you get it done? How do you get it done with participants? And then, to tell the truth, I stayed in stage 1 for 5 years because I did 5 modification refinement studies and test feasibility. Initially, I did only 2 months of intervention just to see if we can get them done. And it was more like a case study approach. And then by the third study, I began to be able to enroll participants at a reasonable rate, and the last study really took off, showing the promising results I was hoping to see. And then by this point, I'm ready to move to the next stage. But before I move, I want to do a quick by show of hands. So for monitor heart exercise safety, we either objectively using heart rate or subjectively using a rating of perceived exertion, or both. So I use both. On those 2 scales in the middle, how many people think the first one is easy to use with people with dementia? And who thinks, just by show of hands, okay? How many thinks the second one is easy to use? And I guess the majority are not decided, right? So this is through, stage 1B feasibility trial. I found the first one actually, despite the 3 different sets of cues, is not easy to use at all by this population because of the words and the sweating of the faces, and people didn't really resonate with them. People will just say, oh, I'm so tired, I'm not gonna do it anymore. So the tired is a negative annotation for this population. So after stage 1, you move into stage 2 or stage 3 efficacy trial. The difference is 2 is in research setting by research provider. 3 is in community setting by community advisor. Here it comes to the versatility of this framework. I actually did a hybrid stage 2 plus 3 because I did it in the community, but the intervention was provided by my research staff. So again, testing the mechanism using imaging and blood biomarkers, and also to look at the effects on cognition. This is the FEAD trial that we completed in 2019, and we showed the desired benefits in trending in the way we want, that we see a less decline in the intervention group, which I can show you. The intervention group is the cycling, and the control group is stretching. We use the traditional 2 parallel group design, 2-to-1 allocation ratio. And we also found affecting neurodegeneration, particularly white matter hyperintensity volume, is likely the mechanism of change through this study. So after the stage 2 or 3 efficacy, we go to the next stage 4 for effectiveness trial. This is totally in the real world. And the last stage is stage 5, where we do the dissemination and implementation trials. So that's the whole NIH stage model. So as part of doing the intervention, developing, designing it, we were really keen to bring our intervention to the real world. So we did some parallel work to make sure we are ready to go into stage 4 and 5. So we published our protocol as a book, and we designed a program to train community providers to do the intervention. Now, the second question I have for you is, where do we go from here? Should we do another stage 2 to 3, or go back to stage 1, do another stage 2, proceed to stage 4 or 5? I want to put it out as a teaser for you. I will talk about it, give you the answer afterwards, but I want you to think about where I should go from here. Now, all those work was foundational to the ASU Ribot Center's scientific framework. What we are trying to focus on older adults living alone with cognitive decline using behavioral intervention, that's technology-enabled digital interventions to help them improve quality of life and hopefully prevent Alzheimer's disease. As you can see here, I have spoke about the mechanism in the middle, from the intervention to the biological target to the primary outcomes in my research. And for the Ribot Center, we're also going to target mechanism of change in terms of social, cognitive, affective, and behavioral mechanisms to make sure the interventions are effective. Now I'm going to throw it back to Matt, and then I'll come back.
Yeah, like I said, we're switching back and forth. So this is a very helpful model, and what I'm going to share with you is the multi-phase optimization strategy model, or what we would call MOST. So MOST fits really nicely into this NIH stage model because it provides some nuts and bolts strategies and approaches to deal, particularly in the stage 1 to stage 3 kind of range that Fang just mentioned. So the multi-phase optimization strategy, it's really rooted in engineering principles of optimization, looking at sort of how do we continuously seek optimization and resource allocation to optimize something. In this case, we're using it in the space of behavior change, of lifestyle intervention. So how do we optimize the use of intervention to get the maximum gain at the lowest amount of effort is sort of the idea, or the lowest amount of resource, which, as we know, is important given how intensive lifestyle interventions can be. So I'm going to walk you through an example, but let me just show you this model a little bit more that was pioneered by Linda Collins. And so in the preparation phase, this is all of the preliminary work that goes in, a lot of which Fang mentioned, really devising a conceptual model, identifying a set of candidate components or important strategies that can be included in a technology, and then conducting pilot work and identifying what we would call an optimization objective, essentially a definition of what we would define as success. Not a power analysis, but an actual definition of here's what success would look like. We then move into an optimization phase, which focuses on early stage experimental designs that help to optimize and identify what are the most effective components. So we're going to talk today about two of these in particular. I'm going to talk about a factorial experiment, and then Fang's going to come back and talk about a SMART trial. But there are many of these, and a lot of these are going to be mentioned here at this conference. So things like fractional factorial experiments, micro-randomized trials that Stephanie is an expert in, system identification and control systems engineering. We'll have a talk on that as well, and other methods that can be used. All of these have the same goal, is how do we identify which strategies are most effective and how do we optimize the combination of strategies together. Once we have an optimized intervention, we then move on to an evaluation stage, and that is where we get to fully powered randomized controlled trials to test whether this package of intervention components works relative to, let's say, usual care or whatever an effective control might be. So let me walk you through an example of this with a trial that we recently completed called Stand-Up TV. So this was a full factorial optimization trial to reduce sedentary screen time in adults. So you can imagine screen time is a problem. It's a problem not just for our kids, it's also a problem for us. And so there's hundreds of trials that guide us on how to reduce screen time in kids. We found 3 in adults. So this is number 4 of what works to help people spend less time on their screens. And of course, that is highly valuable today. And so I did this alongside my colleague at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, Sarah Keetle, and Arlene Fernandez, who hopefully is here somewhere, is going to have a talk on some of the nuts and bolts of actually running an mHealth trial and how to do that effectively. So I'm not going to spend too much time here, but what we can say is sedentary behavior or sitting is profoundly detrimental to our health above and beyond physical activity. And it turns out that screen time, one form of sitting, is about 3 times higher rates of mortality compared to other forms of sitting. So we need to figure out ways to reduce the amount of time we spend on screens. If anything, of course, there's many negative impacts of it, but if anything, just to get us out of our chairs more. So really quickly, I'll mention some of the activities we did in this preparation phase. So first was just really developing the technologies and identifying what strategies we were going to test. We tested 3 strategies, and I'm going to ask you a question after I explain these. One was lockout, and lockout actually locks the screen out once you reach a certain target, in this case 50% of your baseline amount of screen time, the screen literally turns off. Another was text, which was adaptive prompts and reminders, reminding folks how much time they spend on their screens and how to reduce it. And the third was earn, where we connected with a Fitbit and we were able to basically, folks can earn additional screen time by being active. So by raising of hands, how many of you think lockout would be the most effective? Okay. Usually we get a lot of people say, very effective, I would never use it, I would hate it, right? You don't want to get locked out in the middle of the Super Bowl. How about text? Okay, so a couple of people think text. How about earn? Oh, a lot of earns, that's great. Okay, so hang on, I'm going to tell you the answer to that. We also had to develop all of the technology as part of this step. And without going into all the details of this, it's a complex system to be able to objectively monitor someone's screen time, both on a traditional phone and on your smartphone. And our research technology core have a table upstairs that are going to, that if you're interested more in that, you can learn more about that there. This is a little bit of what our stand-up TV app looked like. We had some basic education. We also had daily self-monitoring, giving people real-time objective data on how much screen time they actually were consuming, as well as how they could earn additional screen time if they had that earn condition. And then, of course, behavioral feedback, which is a foundation for any effective behavior change strategy, is to give people feedback about how they're doing. So then we moved into our optimization phase. And here we conducted what's called a full factorial design to be able to test the both individual and combined effects of each of these three components, lockout, text, and earn. So that factorial design looks something like this. So there's 8 possible conditions. So some people got none of the conditions, so they simply got behavioral feedback and monitoring. Some got 1 of the 3 conditions, some got 2 of the 3 conditions, and some got all 3 conditions. And using this full factorial design is very much a resource effective approach to optimize and to identify, well, does lockout work, does text work, does earn work, and what combination of those works the best. And so our optimization criterion was which of these components or combination of components will achieve greater than 60 minutes per day reduction after 16 weeks of use. So an hour less television was our optimization criterion a day. Could you imagine what you could do with an extra hour in your day? So our participants were primarily white and female, with on average 184 minutes of screen time per day. That's right at the national average. About 3 hours, a little over 3 hours a day of screen time is the national average of screen time. Oh, excuse me, I'll move on here. Overall, across all of our conditions, we drastically reduced screen time. On average, it was 75 minutes per day across all of our study arms. That wasn't our question. Our question was what components work the best. But you can see we can move this behavior. And so this shows us how this change occurred. So you can see your predictions and where they all fall here. You can see the red line is our optimization criterion of 60 minutes. So we achieved that for lockout, for earn. We achieved it for earn plus lockout. We achieved it for text plus lockout. And we also achieved it for all 3. Our earn and lockout tied, pretty much tied, with lockout, text, and earn. And so this now prepares us to say, okay, earn and lockout and maybe text, that's for another discussion another day, are the best combination of components to move forward into a fully powered randomized trial to test. And I'm going to pass now this back to Fang to talk about a SMART trial.
All right, back to the teaser question. How many of you think it will work? I should move to a stage 4 or 5? Okay, how many think I should do another stage 2 or 3? How many think I should go back to stage 1? All right, so we have to go back to stage 1. Why not go forward? Because we found such a individual differences in responses to the intervention. I mean, we achieved fantastic adherence, attendance for the trial. but about 40% really improved, and about 20%, 25% stay stable, and then another third actually declined in their fitness level. So we realized we really need to zoom in on this fitness level, aerobic fitness, because you think about how people responded. In the end, when you do between group comparisons, you got nothing, because your intervention group is self-diluting them into the mean of no change. So we need to optimize the trial, and one of the key indicators we didn't focus on when we individualized the intervention is aerobic fitness, which has long been associated with cognitive health. So now we're gonna do the SMART based on this aerobic fitness, and just a little bit about what the SMART is. So SMART trial represents a sequential multi-assignment randomized trial. So people are initially randomized to, for example, 1 and 2, treatment 1 and 2. And then after a certain amount of intervention delivery, you think that should be efficacious. Then you assess the responder variable to see if they truly responded. If they are responders on the top, you may continue, or you may randomize them to other treatment to augment their response. If they are non-responders, you definitely will re-randomize them to adaptive interventions. So hopefully their intervention will improve. You do the same for the second group. So that's the gist of the SMART. That's a very good question. Do I educate patients about the benefits of aerobic exercise? That comes to consent. We have to be, we say aerobic exercise is beneficial cardiovascular and other conditions, but we don't know if it's gonna help with your cognition or Alzheimer's disease. So that led us to the 2.0 version of the VAD trial, which is VAD SMART. So in this trial, we randomized people to 3 months of the intervention. We know that's beneficial. And then after 3 months, we assess aerobic fitness to determine responders and non-responders. We are re-randomizing non-responders to adaptive exercise, which will be aerobic plus muscle building or a high-intensity aerobic exercise. So ours is the simplest SMART design here.
All right, I'm going to bring us home here. So Fang and I couldn't by any means really sort of capture the whole essence of how digital health can impact lifestyle medicine. So I wanted to give sort of a bigger picture of some other areas and point you to other places in the program today where you'll hear that scattered throughout the program. So one of these ways is that digital health can help create more actionable information for patients, providers, and health systems. So what I didn't say is more data, I said more information. So it's about taking data, which we can capture very well, lots of data, and translating that into meaningful information. Here's one example where we've taken some Fitbit data and integrated it into the EHR at the VA, alongside my colleague, Peter Reven. So obviously, Fitbit data, so much data, how do you make sense of it, right? So this is about taking those data, integrating it into the EHR in a way that is actionable for providers. Here's another piece that I did with my colleague Megan Petrov from Edson. This is around CPAP use and sleep improvement at Mayo Clinic, where we designed a screen that is meant not for the patient, but actually meant for the provider. We call it the Show My Provider screen, where the patient can turn the phone around and face it to their provider and give them metrics that providers want to see. And in this case, it's around sleep health. But it's optimized specifically not for patients, but actually for the provider. And it comes from a CPAP machine, a wearable device, and a basic symptom checklist. Here's now patient-facing data that we did with colleagues at Mayo, Jean-Pierre Cochet, Dorothy Sears, and our wonderful staff person, Harsh Anand. And in this case, you can see overlay of continuous glucose monitoring data with activity data from a Fitbit, where we can, along with dietary information, and this is going to help. This helps patients understand how their diet and physical activity choices impact their glucose over the course of a day. Again, designed for patients, in this case, in mind. The other important area is on behavioral intervention optimization, which we talked about a little bit, but it really goes beyond this through advanced algorithms. One person that's a leader in this space is Daniel Rivera from Fulton. He's a control systems engineer looking at taking control systems and translating that into behavioral interventions. And I'm going to be speaking a little bit about that later on in a panel later on today. Of course, we have Hassan Gazemzadeh, who's here today, as well as our next keynote speaker, Diane Cook. They're going to be talking about digital twins, and the use of digital twins for behavior change is one of the applications that we can use there. And then there's also an AI session that will touch on this topic as well. And finally, my colleague Stephanie Carpenter does something called micro-randomized trials. Again, this is another way that we can understand what works when, for whom, under what conditions, to really effectively improve our interventions. And finally, I'll just give a plug that we have our Precision Health Initiative, and this really tries to encapsulate all of this together along with community engagement in this process. So how do we consider differences in genes, lifestyles, environments to develop interventions, most of which are technology-driven, to address the unique challenges that are unique to the individual. So we include in those models genomic sequencing and epigenetics data, bioinformatics, mobile wearable technologies, social behavioral determinants, and environmental sensing to enable more personalized and tailored approaches. And I think collectively with all of that, the goal is to get to a place, leveraging technology, where we can deliver the right intervention to the right person at the right time, and to do that at scale, not just among a small group of patients or participants, but to do that with large groups of individuals, with communities at large. And the only way we're going to get there is if we can leverage digital tech. So thank you all so much. We're excited to have you here, and hopefully this was a good kickoff for the event.